everyone. This is a re-recording of the Braille 102 session from the preschool conference 2023. We had some sound issues, so we are doing the session over again for your benefit, so you can watch it whenever you want. I'm going to share my screen now, so a moment please while I do some button pushing. Here we go. And I want my video to stop. Okay. So this is Braille 102. As I said, this is the next step in learning Braille after learning the alphabet and numbers. So this is an introduction to Braille contractions, they are called. Again, my name is Julie Sumwalt. I am the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired Braille Specialist. That means I get to learn about all sorts of things relating to Braille and pass them on to people like you. We have a few goals for this session. One is to learn the concept of contractions in Braille. What do we mean by contractions? What sorts of things can be contractions? We're going to learn about the types of contractions because they have some similarities, and a bit about how contractions work. We are not going to memorize all the contractions today. We're not even going to be able to recite all the categories of contractions, and certainly not all the rules for using contractions. Your child will be learning this, all of this Braille throughout their education. We have just over an hour to look at it all. So don't be hard on yourself and try and memorize all of this or feel like you're bad for not memorizing it. It's not. This is a no pressure presentation. A reminder of what the Braille cell looks like. It's 6 dots. 1, 2, 3 down the left. The left. 4, 5, 6 down the right. We're going to concentrate on the right side of the cell today. That's 4, 5, 6. And here is the Braille alphabet as a reminder in case you need it during today's session. What are contractions? Well, contractions save space. They save time. They stand for common letter combinations and words. We'll see that later. They might use 1 cell, 2 cells, 3 cells, or a few even use 4 cells. Again, they're grouped according to similarities into categories. There are about 180 contractions. So again, we're not going to memorize everything today. Just kind of absorb it and see this as a preview to your child's education. The first category is alphabetic word signs. These are the easiest contractions. Most of the letters of the alphabet, when they're standing all by themselves with spaces on either side, also stand for entire words. Most of the words start with the letter of the alphabet that they begin with. There are 2 exceptions. X stands for it, and Z means as. Otherwise, B means but, C means can, D means do, or D-O, and so on. Again, you don't have to memorize all of this. Your 3-year-old is not likely to come across the word knowledge, for instance, or quite. Just focus on the ones that you come across a lot when you're reading to your child or out and about. You can talk about these. Another very common category, they're called strong contractions. These can stand for whole words or parts of words. For instance, the first one can be and or A-N-D. So we would use that contraction in words like panda, candy, band, and so on. And there are just 5 of these in this category. A reminder of how the Braille writer works if you're using a Braille writer. The Braille paper is not quite square. It's a little bit wider than it is tall. And you want to put the wide part of the paper into the Braille writer first. The buttons on the front run from left to right, a little round key, high up, line down, and then 3, 2, 1, space bar in the middle, 4, 5, 6, and then backspace on the right. Note that it's the dots go 3, 2, 1, not 1, 2, 3, left to right. So it's 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 6. If you're putting paper into Braille writer, or a Brailler, some people call it, turn the knobs on either side of the Braille writer, the round knobs, all the way away from you. Pull the metal levers on the top toward you, and then put your paper in. It should go in until it hits something. If you haven't turned the knobs all the way away from you, the paper will come out the front, and that's a problem. So be sure those knobs are turned all the way away from you. Pull the levers on top toward you. Put the paper in wide side first, and then you roll it. Flip the levers then on top away from you then to hold the paper down. Then turn the knobs toward you until they stop. The paper should not go all the way into the Braille writer. Again, if it does, that's a problem. You can contact me and we'll try to figure it out if you need to. So now you have your Braille paper in. That little swoop lever on the front of the Braille writer, move that all the way to the left. You just push it down and pull it all the way to the left. You should hear a little ding as the bell goes off. And then you want to push the line down lever down once. And then you're ready to Braille. You push down all the keys at once and then let them that you need for a cell, and then lift up. The carriage will move one cell to the right, and then you push down all the dots that you need for the next cell and then lift up, and the carriage will keep moving to the right until you hear a little ding. That means there are 5 spaces left. So you can still Braille a little bit past that. And then when you're done, you need to push the line down key once and move the that little swoopy lever on the front over to the left again. And then you can continue on with the next line. When you're done with all of this, before I forget, you do just the opposite. You will move the levers, well, not quite the opposite. You'll move the knobs, you'll turn them all the way away from you again so that the paper is loose. And then you pull the levers on top toward you. The paper should just be ready to roll then or fall out even if you're at the bottom of the page. And then move this little swoopy lever all the way to the left again. There's a spring in there, and if you leave that swoopy lever, the carriage return over on the right, it stretches out that spring. So don't leave that carriage return, that little swoopy lever, pushed over to the right for as you store it, or even for a long time. Move it over to the left so that the spring is maintained well. So that's for the Braille writer. If you downloaded PerkDuck, you'll be using a keyboard instead and a computer monitor. Just a regular computer will be fine. But now you're going to use the home row keys, S, D, F, and J, K, L. They work just like the keys on the Braille writer did. 3, 2, 1 not 1, 2, 3, but 3, 2, 1, 4, 5, 6, corresponding to S, D, F, and J, K, L. Also on your keyboard, you can use your backspace key, enter, this is like your line down key on the Braille writer, so that will force the line down. Your text will wrap just like it does normally, but if you want to make sure that it starts a new line, you press the enter key. The spacebar key works just the same as it does on any keyboard. There are some question and answer slides in the original presentation, but since we're just recording this, I'm going to skip past all of these question and answer slides and skip to the next slide. But if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, Julie Sumwalt at WCBVI. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the things that we're talking about here. Here are some practice sentences using the words that we just talked about, alphabetic word signs and strong contractions. All the words that are underlined have a contraction. You can use the handout if you like, or you can use the poster. I'll show you that in just a moment. The poster lists these words in alphabetical order so that you can look up the word can instead of having to flip through the handout. Right now, it's 50-50 which way you want to go, but as we learn more of these contractions, you'll probably want to use the poster. So let me show you that for just a moment. They're in your folders. They're in your folders. You have two posters. One says UEB Braille at the top. The other one says Worldwide Leader. We'll talk about Worldwide Leader later on, but for now, just focus on the UEB Braille poster. It has the alphabet and the numbers in the upper left, the contractions in alphabetic order. If there's a little house icon, let me see if I can find one. Here we go. In the A's, there's a little house or a pentagon and then A and C E. That means some Braille needs to come before that contraction before it will make sense. So you can't just have, if A and C were a word, you couldn't just have A and C contraction by itself. You need to have some Braille in front of it in order for that to mean A and C E. So you might like to use the poster in your folder, or you might like to use the handout. Either one is fine. And I'll give you some time for that. You can pause the video. The next slide shows the answers. You can compare your work with this. You don't have to do them all at once. You can always come back and finish later if you want, or just forget it. But do what you like. Again, this is just for practice, for fun, no pressure. Here are the answers. They're also in your handout, and you can compare them as you like. Let's move on. Another category of contractions is they can function as either word signs or group signs. Word sign means that they're going to be a whole word, and group sign means they're just going to be a group of letters. So the first one, the contraction is dots 1 and 6. All by itself, if there are spaces on either side, it's going to stand for an entire word, child. But if there's Braille around it, it's going to stand for the word letters CH, and so on from down the columns on this slide. So shall is the word represented by those dots 1, 4, 6, or if there's Braille around it, then they become the letters SH. Let's look at some examples on the next slide. So she, shall, here's that SH contraction I was just discussing. The Braille on the right is dots 1, 4, 6 again for the SH part of the word she, and then the letter E and space, and then that contraction again. That's 1, 4, 6, nothing after it. So that's standing all by itself. That means the word shall now. And the next one, stand still. We have ST with dots 3 in the lower left and dot 4 in the upper right. That is ST, and then that's A and D contraction that we talked about before. Space, and then ST again, and then more spaces. So now that contraction means the whole word still, and so on through this slide. More practice if you would like. Again, all the underlined words have a contraction. Notice in number 2, I have a slash in the middle of the word shout. That's because there are 2 contractions in the word shout, and I couldn't make it look like the underlining look like that in PowerPoint. So I put in a slash to show that there are 2 contractions to look up, SH and OU. And then you need to braille the letter T. On your handout, I mistakenly underlined the letter T. That's incorrect. You need to braille the letter T. There is a contraction for OU, however, that you need to look up. So just try this, just 4 sentences on this slide, and the next slide shows the answers. Here are the answers to that practice for word signs and group signs. There are some more group signs, and I just have some examples here. These are only group signs. They generally are not entire words, unless you wanted to say something like ow for OW. So here are 6 of them to show you. The first one is AR. There's a special dot configuration for those 2 letters, AR. And then I have some Braille words, far, car, bear, like the animal, bear, care, and arm. Notice that AR can be at the end of a word, in the middle of a word, or at the beginning of a word. And so on for the contractions down this list, except for the last one, ING. ING cannot be at the beginning of a word. It can be in the middle and it can be at the end, but it cannot be at the beginning. So you will not see it at the beginning of words like ingredient. You could, however, see it in sing, king, playing, or single. And then there are lower word signs. These are called lower word signs because they use the lower part of the Braille cell, not the upper 2 dots, and they stand for entire words. So the technical term for these is lower word signs, but you don't have to remember that. These can't be used when punctuation comes after them because punctuation is also in the lower part of the cell. So to keep things from being confused, the rule is that these need to be spelled out when there's punctuation touching them. Sometimes there are other little contractions that we can use, but we can't use the entire word sign. So I will show you some examples of that on the next slide. There's a contraction, a lower word sign contraction for enough. Did he have enough gas to go home? In this case, there are spaces on either side of that word enough, not punctuation. So I can use that lower word sign in the lower part of the cell for the entire word enough. But in the second sentence, he did not have enough, period. There's a period there after the word enough. So we can't use that lower word sign contraction for that. We can use other contractions, however. There's a contraction for EN, which I'll show you on the next slide. And we just talked about OU and GH, and then a period. The next set of examples, was he upset? There's a lower word sign contraction for the word was, and we can use it here because there are spaces on either side. It's just a capital W there. That's not punctuation, that's a capital sign. The next example, however, yes, he was. Was is next to a period, so we have to spell out the word was, W-A-S. Some more about lower group signs now. These aren't whole words, these are just groups of letters, and they're lower because they're in the lower part of the cell. So sometimes contractions are in the lower part of the cell. That's all you really need to remember about this, is just keep in mind that sometimes contractions might be down low. Two lower group signs are IN and EN. I just talked about EN and the word enough in this previous slide. So you have IN and EN, and we use those just about anywhere. There are 3 contractions that can only be used at the beginning of a word, and 5 that can only be used in the middle of a word. And that's because if you notice, some of these contractions are using the same dots. So depending on where they are and what's going on around them, they'll mean different things. I have 3 examples here to show you what I'm talking about. In the phrase fluffy egg, there's a contraction for FF and there's a contraction for GG. We can use the FF and fluffy because there are letters on either side of that FF contraction. But we can't use the GG because there's nothing after GG, and GG has to be used in the middle of a word. So we have to spell out GG for egg. And there are 2 other examples for you to look at and compare. Okay. Now there are a bunch of contractions that will use the cell before it to mark the next letter as a contraction. So some of them will use initial letter, they're called initial letter contractions. And that's because the contraction or the word starts with the letter of that is used in the contraction. So for the first one, for example, the word day, that's a D there, and we put a .5, the middle dot on the right side of the cell before it, before the D, and now it stands for not the word do, as it did in alphabetic word signs, it stands for the word day. The next one, ever or ever, it's E-V-E-R. That starts with E, so that's an E there, and put a .5 in front of it to mean those letters or word E-V-E-R. And so on. There are a bunch on this slide and the next slide. Again, don't stress out about trying to remember all of these. Your very young child is not likely to come across the word character or ought, so don't worry about those. But you might come across some or young or under, words like that, where. So again, just be aware that some contractions will have a .5 in front of them. That's really all you need to know. But here's some practice for you if you really want to get into it. For sentences, again, the underlined words have a contraction to them. At this point, you may want to use your poster so you can look up words. Some of these have a .5 in front of them and some of them don't, because we've talked about both kinds of contractions now. And here are the answers. Other kinds of initial letter contractions will use .545, excuse me. There are just 5 of them. And again, these are pretty advanced words, except for maybe once upon a time. So don't worry about the others. Just know that they're coming in the future for your child. And then there is a group of final letter contractions. And just like the previous contractions use the first letter of the groups of letters that they stand for, final letter contractions use the last letter of the group of letters that they stand for. These are always just letters. They're not words. So they must have a letter before them. They can't be in the beginning of a word. They can be in the middle or at the end. The first one, for instance, it represents the letters O-U-N-D. D is the last letter of that sequence. So that's a D there in Braille, and the dots 4, 6 in front of the D means O-U-N-D. So depending which dots come in front of the D will mean different things. It could mean do with nothing around it, or it could be day if there's a dot 5 in front of it, or here we have dots 4, 6, D, O-U-N-D, and Braille round and found. Look at the letters L-E-S-S. We can use that in words like bless and coatless, but not the word lesson, because L-E-S-S comes first in that word. So we can't use the contraction there. Some other kinds of final letter contractions use dots 5, 6 in front of them. And here's that list and some Braille to go along with it. And then there's a completely different kind of contraction. These are called short forms. There are a lot of them. These take longer words and take letters out of that longer word to make a sort of abbreviation or shorthand that means that word. So on here, on this slide, the first word about, you can just use the word letters A-B, and that represents the word about. Or ABV, that means the word above. If there are parentheses around some of these letters, that means that there's a contraction, another contraction that can be used for those letters. So it's like a contraction within a contraction. For instance, there's a contraction for BE and then the letter C. And those two cells together mean the word because. Or BEF means the word before, and so on. I'm going to flip through the rest of the slides pretty quickly because this is just a category. You don't need to memorize all of these. Just be aware that this is what's going on. Again, your little one is not likely to come across the word perceiving or conceiving. Don't worry about those just now. Just be aware again that these things do exist, and you can look it up on your poster if you like and see if you can figure out what it means. So that's it for the contractions. Now I want to talk about something that's a little bit technical, but I feel that it's very important and you need to know about it so that you can make sense out of the Braille if you're reading a story to your child or reading their homework to make sure that they're doing their homework or whatever it is you need to know Braille for. I think you need to know about something called a grade 1 indicator. And this is a composition sign, meaning it doesn't exist in print. There's no such thing. And this is used when we really do mean letters, not a contraction. It's indicated with dots 5, 6 on the right hand part of the cell. So the lower right part of the cell, dots 5, 6 is the grade 1 indicator. For instance, the first example, that's a CD there, preceded by 2 dot 6s in the lower right part of the cell, and that means capital. 2 capital signs in a row capitalize the whole word. So dot 6, CD really means the word could in all capital letters. But suppose you really do mean CD, compact disc, certificate of deposit, something else that uses the letters CD. You don't want it to be read as could, you want it to be read as CD. That's when you use this grade 1 indicator, you put that in front of all of that Braille to mean that what follows next is not a contraction or a number. There are some other examples here. Also, if you really mean that guy over there, L, A-L, you need that grade 1 indicator. B by itself means but suppose you really do mean the letter B. You put a grade 1 indicator in front of it, and now it's read as the letter B, not the word but. 22, suppose that last 2, you really mean it to mean B, not the number 2. So you put a grade 1 indicator in front of that B, and now it reads to B. Here is a little bit of reading practice. I have 2 sentences that I've written twice. The first time I've written it out letter for letter, what you learned in Braille 101 or elsewhere. See if you can figure out what it says. And then I have the same sentence after that arrowhead bullet point, the same sentence using contractions. For now, just look at how long that first time is when it's spelled out letter for letter. And then look how short it is when the contractions are used. The first time it uses 2 lines. The second time with contractions, it doesn't even use one whole line. So contractions really help speed things up as far as reading and writing go. They also take up a lot less space, physical space on the shelf, so that books aren't quite so long. Now, not to scare you, but there are 2 Braille codes out there in the United States. We switched to this code that we're talking about now in 2016 officially. So your child will be learning UEB. Don't worry about the old code right now. But if you get a book that's was brailled before 2016, you might see some of these contractions. There are 9 of them. I just want you to be aware that there are some contractions out there in the old code. You don't have to remember these at all. In case you're interested why those 9 were eliminated in this new code, these are the reasons why. So the new code is called Unified English Braille, UEB for short. The old code was called English Braille American Edition, or EBAE for short. I have some examples here for 3 words just to show you that the words are still quite readable. It's just that you're going to see some different contractions if you get an older book. If you're not going to get older books, you can completely ignore what I'm saying about this. And now, after all that technicality, let's have some fun. You can draw things with your Braille writer, especially now that you know contractions, or you can look them up anyway. You can draw, I have here a heart. Just follow the instructions exactly, and you should end up with what you see here on the slide. Capital letters mean there's a contraction. So for step 1 for this heart, you Braille an S, then an E, then an I, and the WH contraction. You can look that up. And then steps 2 and 3, and hopefully you end up with a heart. Oh, before I forget, I want to show you the other poster. So the old code was is on this poster, Worldwide Leader. It shows the extra contractions, and in the lower right of this poster, the punctuation and composition signs, quite a few of those have changed. Some are the same, but some have changed. But the one you want to focus on is this one. It says UEB Braille at the top. This is the one that we've been talking about. So between up till now, nothing has changed. The Braille is the same, the letters are the same, the contractions are the same. It's just that you might have some extra contractions in that in the old code. Okay, that's all I wanted to say on that. Going back to the heart, when you've done that, try drawing a shamrock. Again, follow the instructions exactly. Capital letters mean contractions. If you really like that and want to look up some more Braille drawing, you can do an online search for it. Here are two results that I got when I searched for Braille drawing on a Braille writer. I think they're both fairly old. They've been around for a long time, but they're still valid. Just keep in mind those extra contractions that you might see in older material. I can't vouch for the accuracy either because there are some mistakes. See if you can find the mistakes, but they're a lot of fun. You can draw everything from, oh, I don't know, a teddy bear, a sailboat, an American flag, all sorts of things. These are a lot of fun if you would like to try your hand at these. If you want extra copies of the Braille posters, you can go to this website. They're from Duxbury. That's a software company. Or you can follow the prompts. Either you can do the link or follow the prompts. They only have the new one, the UEB one. They removed the older poster. But if you want that, I have a copy and you can contact me and I would be happy to share it with you. And that's it. Those are the contractions for Braille. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming. Again, just be aware that some of these things are coming up. You don't have to remember all of it. I'm glad you came and listened to this. Thank you very much.